Hello, hello, hello everyone. We're doing some more of our homework, getting ready for all the mad planting and sowing we're going to be doing in spring. So today, as part of the pre-season training for gardeners, we're going to be talking about the information you can get about all of the seeds, using the seed packets, catalogues, checking suppliers' websites, all of that, and how useful it is. So seed packets are actually really useful, so are catalogues, if you know how to read them, and that's the trick. So today we're going to have a look at a few of my seed packets, and we'll talk about what all the info, the words, the symbols, all the jargon means and how it's useful. And even if you're a seed swapper like me and you have packets where you don't have that info, I'll show you how you can find it. Because, you know, this is all good for your garden journals. Now, I get asked an awful lot about where do I buy my seeds. It's one of those difficult things to answer because I don't use just one supplier. Pretty much I look for a particular seed variety and who's got that. And then I'll buy it from whichever supplier is cheapest. Obviously though, I'm always a bit wary of, have I used them before? Do they look like they're reliable? But I don't just follow one supplier or anything like that. So I tend to buy from Mr. Fothergirls. You'll recognise it when I've used these seed packets and videos before. So you'll recognise kind of the branding. Sometimes I get the odd seeds from... Sometimes I've got freebies. Stuff that's kind of came in magazines and all that kind of thing. So that's King Seeds is a supplier of these. More magazine freebies. Another one that I've been using quite a lot over the last couple of years is Johnson's. And also I've got quite into Premier Seeds Direct, which you've seen me do quite a lot of these little foil packets. So I was asked recently about where do I get my seeds? And is it okay to buy the seeds you see in like your supermarkets or garden centres, that kind of thing? Absolutely yes, and here's why. Most of these big companies all get their seeds from the same nursery suppliers. Mr. Fothergills are some of my favourite seed packets in the whole world because they have got so much useful info on them. So this is one of my tomatoes. And it's Sweet Million, which is an F1. It's one of my favourite tomatoes to grow because you get so many tomatoes from this guy. Here's the first thing then. F1. You'll see F1 on quite a lot of seed packets. All it means is that's a hybrid. So what does a hybrid mean? Quite simply, this plant has come about because other plants have been cross-pollinated to get all the features this plant has. So, for example, somebody went, God, that tomato plant gives loads and loads and loads of tomatoes. And that tomato plant is a really nice manageable size. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could have a really nice manageable sized plant that gave us loads of tomatoes? So they cross-pollinate those two plants so that the baby plants will have some of the best features of both. The idea being that eventually they'll get what they were aiming for, a really manageable sized plant with lots and lots of tomatoes. So that's what F1 means. It's hybrid. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people get mixed up and they think hybrid means GMO or genetically modified. It's not. As a gardener, you do not even need to think about GMO seeds. You cannot get them. They are not available to gardeners in the UK. In fact, I don't think anywhere in Europe, and I'm pretty sure you can't get them in North America either. They are strictly for agriculture and they're very controlled. So don't even worry about that. You're never going to get GMO seeds, okay? Now, F1 hybrid, it doesn't mean anything weird and Frankensteinish. It is literally what happens in nature. Naturally, insects, the wind, etc. move between the plants and cross-pollinate them. On the seed packet, the F1 just means it has been done in a bit more of a controlled environment, that's all. Now, why would you go with that? Well, for me, my courgettes are a big one. I buy hybrid or F1 courgette varieties because I can then get some plants that may be resistant to things like powdery mildew. You guys know it is a big issue in Scotland because it's a very damp climate here. So that's why I might get a plant that gives really, really gorgeous, big, really tasty fruit, but it's also resistant to particular diseases because it's been bred specifically for that purpose. So that's hybrid F1. Other side of that is you may hear open-pollinated or heirloom. Okay, now neither one, I should point this out, neither one is better than the other. So open pollination is when basically it's just out there in nature and nature does the job, but it's pretty much going to mean that plant is only pollinated using other identical plants. Okay, now that is why if you have an heirloom or an open pollinated variety, you can then save the seeds from that plant and guarantee you will get the exact same plant the next year. You can't guarantee that with a hybrid with the seeds because it could bring along any of the features of any of the parent plants. Whereas if it's an heirloom or an open pollinated seed, then it's going to have pretty much the features from both parent plants which were the same to start with. So that's why. Heirloom you'll hear used particularly to do with history. People tend to use that for an open pollinated plant that has been around for a certain length of time. Depends on where you're buying them from, though it's not all the same. So it can be that it has to have been around since before the Second World War or something like that. It's got a bit of history to it. But neither is better, okay? You can't just automatically say one will taste better than the other, etc. It's just about a plant's particular traits. So that is F1 hybrid versus open pollinated or heirloom. The difference between the two. This is another thing. On the bottom of the seed packets is a date. And it is really worth looking at that date. Okay, so I can see this was packed in July 2019 and they need to be sown by 2022. Okay, they don't need to be, but that's what they recommend. So that's almost, if you like, a kind of use by date on the seeds. Now, I said they don't have to be. If you want the best yield from these seeds, if you want them to be as viable as they possibly can be, then you want to use them up by that date. However, you can use them after that date. They just may not be quite as viable as they were, okay? So it's not really a use by date, if you like. It's more a kind of like just a nudge, nudge, you know, these seeds are getting on a wee bit. I am going to do a video with you guys on how you can test the viability of your seeds. So that's coming up. Okay. Now, the other thing that I love on these ones is two bits. One, there's an awful lot of information there about the plants. So if you read this, it basically tells you what to do. So I get quite a lot where people say to me, oh, when do I sow this seed? Or what temperature does this seed need to be? That kind of thing. Well, actually, your seed packet tells you all of that. And if you follow your seed packet, you should get really good results because the info you get here is about basically the perfect environment for these seeds. Because think about it like this. And this is something that Steve from Green Side Up always says, and it is the best advice ever. He always tells us that the seed manufacturers will give you the info that will get the best results because they want you to like their product and buy more. So they want you to do everything to make this little guy the best plant ever. So it tells you then. It says a warm windowsill is all you need to get these started. So that's good to know for two counts. Number one, it's saying, don't panic if you don't have a big fancy greenhouse. You can start them off in a warm windowsill. Awesome. But however, the flip side of that is telling you these need to be warm. So you can't really plant them outside if it's cold. So that's a good thing to know. And we'll get on to when to plant them in a second. I've gone all snuffly sounding because I've just had an allergy attack and I've been sneezing. So apologies if I suddenly sound really weird. It tells you as well how to sow them. So sow them 1/2 centimetre deep, thinly in a pot of compost. So thinly, so you don't have to thin out all the little plants and damage the roots. So that's good. 1/2 centimetre deep. Now I've said this before with seeds. Seeds are like little eggs, okay? Everything that little plant needs to get going is in that tiny little seed. All its energy, everything. But it's not infinite. It will eventually run out. So one of the things I say to people is don't sow too deeply I know that you might think that's great because, you know, they've got lots of soil and everything, but if that little seed uses all of its energy trying to find the surface, it's not going to have much left for that little seedling. Okay, so follow the guidance on that one. Another awesome thing here. Temperature of 15 to 20 C or 60 to 68 F is ideal. So remember I said the seed suppliers want the perfect environment for your seeds so that you get the best out of them? Well, there you go. It's telling you exactly what temperature it needs to be to sow these. Now, when it's saying that, it's talking about the soil temperature, not the outside temperature. So good thing to remember. Now then it goes on to tell you a bit about the actual plant when it grows. So it tells you that they don't mind cooler, but they don't like cold conditions. And they need large pots or grow bags. And it also tells you to pinch out the side shoots regularly and pinch out the growing tip when you have 5 to 6 trusses. So that's really good info. Pinch out the side shoots. That's a good thing to know because there is something else we need to look for. Let me see, is it on here to tell you? Yes, there is a word here, indeterminate. Okay, this is a handy thing to know because there are 2 main varieties of tomato plant and how you treat them is different depending on which variety it is. This is indeterminate. The other variety is determinate. So look for that on your seeds, okay? Indeterminate are the really tall plants. They will keep growing, they'll be huge. So you have to kind of control that. The way you do it is you pinch out the side shoots so that you've only got that one tall stem and your tomatoes grow on that one. And you also pinch out the top to stop it growing any taller. Now, determinate tomatoes, determinate meaning they grow to a determined size and then they stop growing. They also get called a bush variety. So those are things to look out for. Those ones, you don't pinch out the side shoots. You just let them grow as they are because they won't get too big. They tend to be 4 to 5 feet tall, that's all. Whereas indeterminate can get to about 10 feet tall. So that's handy. Look for determinate or indeterminate specifically for your tomatoes. So it says here, you can plant out April to May in large plots in your greenhouse. For outdoor crops, delay your sowing so you don't want too big a plant before it's ready to go outside because remember they like warmer conditions. And it says remember to gradually acclimatise your plants before planting out and avoid frost. So there you go. So it's good to know when your frost date is going to be in springtime so you know not to put your tomato plants out before that has passed. Okay, good thing to know. Now, there's another really cool thing here I want you to see, and it's this. This is awesome. It's a little chart that actually shows you, it's got the different colours on here, and it shows you what months you can sow it indoors, what months you can plant it outside, and what months you should expect to be harvesting your tomatoes. So that's really handy. And if, like me, you do a lot of planning, and you guys have probably seen it, I've got a spreadsheet that's got all my planning for next year on it. If you haven't seen my planning video where I shared the spreadsheet with you guys, I'll put a link in the description so you can go and have a look. Okay, so that's handy on that one then. That's tomatoes and things to look out for. Let's look at something different. Winter hardy. So hardy. You'll see hardy, you'll see half hardy, you'll see tender. These are really handy words because it tells you how they will cope in your garden in winter. So hardy means it'll cope with the cold temperatures in this area. Half hardy means it'll do okay as long as it's not too severe. And tender means do not put that out in winter. Tender, exactly as it sounds. A little tender plant won't cope if it gets hit by frost and snow and cold winds and things. Things like basil. I can't grow basil outdoors here because it's far too tender for my garden. So those are handy words to look out for. Spring onions, winter hardy. You can get the same variety that aren't winter hardy, so always check. The pollinator logo. Because obviously we all want to grow flowers in our garden, even if we're big veg growers. Flowers in our garden helps to encourage the pollinators that will pollinate our veg plants that have flowers. You want that wee symbol then, the little bee, to tell you that these are good for pollinators. Oh, there's an interesting one. So this is Rudbeckia, which you guys have seen, we love these, but it has a note here that says best grown is a half hardy annual. So we talked about half hardy. It means it will cope with most winter conditions, but not really, really severe ones. But annual, so what you might hear then is annual, biannual, or perennial. So an annual is, generally you hear that with flowers, but it means a plant that will flower and set seed and then die in that year. So if it's best to grow these as annuals, it means I need to sow these again every year to get the plant back, okay? If it's a perennial, however, that means it will just keep growing, so you don't have to re-sow and grow new plants every year. So for you veg lovers out there, you've probably heard it in terms of maybe perennial spinach. Spinach that you can keep harvesting every year, okay? So that's annual versus perennial. Biannual is a plant that will grow, flower, set seed and die over 2 years. So you'll see this quite often. My foxgloves can take a year to really kind of come on, and then in the second year they put up the big flower spike, and then they'll set the seed and they'll die. Now, I was saying that I'm getting really into Premier Seeds Direct for supplying the seeds. Awesome seeds, I've never had any issues, but also they're super cheap because they don't come in the fancy packaging with all the photos and printing and everything on it. So they're much cheaper, they just come in these little foil packets. But what happens then if you want info about this seed? What are you going to do? Because there's not much on here. It tells you what variety it is, it tells you how many seeds you'll get in the packet, and it tells you when your sow-by date is. But that's kind of about it. Not to fear, because you can always go and look up the supplier's website and they will have lots and lots of info there. So let's have a look at that then. Premier Seeds Direct, and this is Courgette Greenbush. So here we go. We will go and we'll look for this then. So Courgette Greenbush. It's that easy. You can just go and have a good old Google, go to their website and let's see what info's there. There we go. So we've got a list and there it's there, Courgette Greenbush. I always tell you guys how awesome a garden journal is. Just keeping a little record of everything that happens in your garden and everything you do, because you can look back on it year on year and it is a fantastic source of info. Things like when your frosts happen, if you record it, you'll always know when your first and last frosts are likely to happen and you can prepare. But I also recommend record all of those important details about your seeds in your journal as well. Record, don't just say you're growing tomatoes and maybe put the variety. Put all that info like when should they be sown, what temperatures do they like, what size might they get to, etc, etc. Because if you ever lose the seed packet, that way you'll still have that info. And again, it can be a fantastic record of your growing throughout the years and you can go back to it. If you don't have seed packets and you're getting it on the website, again, take a note of it in your journal. So let's see what it says about Greenbush here then. So, Courgette Greenbush. So it's popular and reliable. We like reliable. Abundance. We like abundance. Uniform shaped fruits on compact plants. Now, that's why I chose this variety, compact plants. I'm growing it in my raised bed and I want to make sure that I can get a nice small plant that will fit in there, but I'll get a lot of courgettes from. So that's why I chose this one. I'll give it a try. I've never grown this one before, but you guys will come along on the journey with me, so we'll see. Is it compact and does it give me an abundance of fruits? So what else does it say? Scrolling down and you can see here cultivation advice. So the same as on the backs of these packets, we've got this on the website. It tells you here it's got the early start from late March, so that's great. It tells you the critical part is temperature. So again, that's a good thing to note. You're not going to want to sow these seeds too early because you want the soil to be warm. Now here's another handy thing. Once the plant starts to fruit, feed every 14 days with a tomato type fertiliser. These are greedy plants. That's really useful info for you guys to know. When it starts fruiting, you need to remember and make sure it's fed. It needs a lot of nutrition. So there you go. If you don't have fancy seed packets, you can always go to the suppliers' websites to get info there. If there's no info or you need something that's not there, you can always contact them. They'll be more than happy to give you that info. These came today. I have got spring onions and some tomatoes, which Danny from the Grapevine Allotment has sent me. I'm quite excited about these. You will hear more about these because they're going to be part of a tomato experiment later in the year. So I'm not telling you what variety they are just now or anything. Will tell you though, Malcolm Kingswell at Allotments for Fun and Food was growing some of these. In fact, that's where some of these seeds came from originally. Malcolm gave them to Danny and Danny has given me some. There we go then guys, just a very brief look at seed packets so that you can go and have a good old nosy. So what to do guys, in the comments, what are your favourite seed suppliers and why? Because it will be handy for all the new gardeners out there. And do their seed packets have loads of info on them? Do they have any info that mine don't? It'd be really interesting to find out. So I hope that was useful guys. And as I promised earlier, if you want to see the video where I actually planned out my whole garden for next year and all my growing and sowing, and also there is a link in that video for you to download my plan if you want for yourself to use it, then it's right here. You can go and watch that now. And I will see you guys next time. See you everyone!